In this series, we're going to be looking over some of the more lesser known cards that would probably never appear in one of my other types of videos because they either aren't very good or not bad enough to take a ranking or top 10 or be talked about specifically for its own merits. And with over 10,000 cards in the game, there's quite honestly a lot to talk about. To start out this video, let's go over Psychic Blade, one of my favorite equip cards. This is an equip spell card that has the effect where you have to pay life points in multiples of 100, but only up to 2,000, in order to equip this card to a monster of your choice, with that monster gain attack equal to the amount of life points paid. So if you pay the maximum amount of 2,000 life points, you can grant one of your monsters 2,000 attack. And as kind of a rarity amongst attack gain equip spells, Psychic Blade is a hard once per turn on its activation, so you can only ever activate one Psychic Blade per turn. And Psychic Blade itself is a retrain of an old Psychic support card called Psychic Sword, which was an equip spell card that could only be equipped to a Psychic type monster and would provide an attack boost based on how much life points you had less than your opponent, up to a maximum of 2,000, with Psychic Blade coming out 6 years later in 2015. Now, what's so interesting about Psychic Blade that I would add it to this video? Well, this is one of the single highest amount of attack boosts you can give to a monster that's completely generic, and it's kind of a ridiculously high amount too. If we take a look at similar cards like Fusion Weapon or Ritual Weapon, two incredibly specific equip cards that can only be equipped to either level 6 or lower fusion monsters or level 6 or lower ritual monsters, it has the effect to grant that monster 1,500 attack and defense. So it's 1,000 more stats total than Psychic Blade, but all we really care about is attack points when it comes to monsters in 99% of cases, and Psychic Blade is able to give a bigger attack boost than both of these cards, which were designed to give ridiculously high attack boosts, with the restriction that they can only be equipped to very specific types of cards. When compared to something like Ballista of the Rampart Smashing, this is an equip card that can only increase the attack of a monster by 1,500 points if it's specifically attacking a face-down defense position monster, which is, again, 500 less than Psychic Blade. There's also Double-Edged Sword, which is another equip spell card that can give a monster 2,000 attack, however, it has two downsides to it. Both players take any battle damage from the attacks involving the equipped monster, and also, if you take 2,000 or more points of damage, this card sends itself to the graveyard. So if you try to use Double-Edged Sword in order to attack your opponent directly for 2,000 more points of damage, it's basically going to destroy itself with the attack boost it provides, also making you take a huge chunk of damage as well. There's also Amulet of Ambition, which can increase the attack of a normal monster equipped to it by 500 times the level difference between it and your opponent's monster. So, if you attach Amulet of Ambition to something like Digitron, the highest attack level 2 normal monster in the game, and have it crash into a level 4 monster, it only gains 1,000 attack points. Or if you attack into a level 6 monster, it has the same amount of attack point increase as Psychic Blade, where you have to attack into a level 7 or higher monster for it to beat the 2,000 threshold. And also, most equipped spell cards that grant some other beneficial effect will cap out at only giving 1,000 extra attack, like in the case of UA Power Jersey or Axe of Despair. Now, there are some eco spell cards that can grant more attack points than Psychic Blade, but pretty much all of them require some special conditions in order to match its power. Mage Power can increase the attack and defense of the monster it's equipped to by 500 for every spell and trap card you control. So if you have a full back row plus a field spell, that's a 3,000 attack boost, which easily beats out Psychic Blade. However, that requires you to control 6 cards, whereas Psychic Blade is only 1 card from your hand and a paltry life point cost. There is also United We Stand, which can give a monster an attack boost of 5,600 if you control 7 monsters, or 4,000 attack if you control 5 monsters. And it is infinitely harder to get 5 monsters of the field than it is to get 6 spell or trap cards, but can provide a higher attack boost than Psychic Blade generically. There's also Power of the Guardians, which can increase the attack and defense of monster by 500 for every spell counter it has, and gains a spell counter every time the equipped monster battles. So after 4 battles, it can provide the same attack boost as Psychic Blade. But again, you can kind of see how much of a powerhouse Psychic Blade is when it outperforms a lot of very specific types of equipped spell cards, which only give very high attack boosts because they're so specific, and also it matches other generic equipped spell cards that have to jump through hoops in order to beat its power. So as you can see, Psychic Blade is not the best equipped spell in terms of granting generic power, as there are some cards which technically beat it out. It's also not the strongest equipped spell when it comes to granting extra effects, as cards like Grid Rod and Power of the Guardians definitely have a beat on that front. But if you're trying to build a funny gimmick where you're attacking 4 times with a Lyreless Assembled Nightingale, Psychic Blade is one of the singular best cards that you can include in a gimmick deck like that in order to guarantee an OTK without having to rely on other setup. But since both attack boosts are kinda bad and eco spell cards are kinda bad, Psychic Blade doesn't really have an opportunity to show up in other videos, even though it is technically a stellar card in what it sets out to accomplish, and is a good introduction to the kinds of cards we'll be talking about in this series. although we will also be talking about cards that are notable for other reasons than just their effects. Next up, let's talk about Bean Soldier. Bean Soldier is a level 4 plant monster with 1400 attack that isn't really notable, to be honest. Its stat line is nothing special for a vanilla monster. There's plenty of other plant monsters with higher attack that you could use instead. In fact, Angel Trumpeter is probably the most notable level 4 normal plant monster, because it's both a 1900 attack beatstick that's also a tuner monster. So ideally, there's no reason to ever play Bean Soldier. However, this may surprise you to hear, but if you try to purchase Bean Soldier over Angel Trumpeter on the secondary market, you could buy 15 Angel Trumpeters for the same cost as a single Bean Soldier. And that's because Bean Soldier only ever got one printing back in 2002 in a tournament pack first season, and is one of the few common cards to have never received a reprinting since. You see, unlike other card games, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very aggressive in their reprint policy, and will reprint generic cards all the time. If a card sees enough play, it'll probably get reprinted a couple of times. So there's a handful of cards like Bean Soldier that are unnecessarily expensive, simply because it wasn't good enough to get a reprint, as its current going rate on TCG Player is $15 on the low end. However, for such an unassuming old school vanilla monster, it surprisingly received a retrain in Rush Duels as Baked Bean Soldier. In this version, it's a fire type monster with 1500 attack and 0 defense. In Yu-Gi-Oh! There are some cases where a monster will get a fire type version but with 0 defense points, like in the case of Blazing Inpachi, or another card in Rush Duel, the Fire Dragon. However, it may seem like only a 100 attack boost is not that big a deal, but in Rush Duel specifically, 1500 is a premium stat line for a level 4 monster. There are only like 2 level 4 non-legendary monsters that have more than 1500 attack in Rush Duels, and the ones that do go above 1600 attack are legend cards, which you can only have one of those in your deck, period. So, Baked Bean Soldier is a legitimately good beatstick in Rush Duels, where there's another version of Bean Soldier in Rush Duels called Bean Soldiersy, although that card hasn't officially been released yet and has only appeared in the anime, which also has a premium stat line of 1500 attack. And of course, the original Bean Soldier is also in Rush Duels, and is probably not as expensive as its TCG counterpart. Bean Soldier also appears in the trap card Mame Maki along with Jerry Beansman and Natura Beans, which are the only 3 bean-themed cards in the game. And the reason they appear is because the card is depicting a Japanese tradition of throwing beans at someone wearing a demon or ogre mask. And since there are so few bean cards in the game, they just included all 3 of them into this card artwork to symbolize the tradition, as the card is literally named after said tradition. Next up, we have Performapal Trump Witch. This is a level 1 pendulum monster with a scale of 4 that has the pendulum effect where you can fusion summon a fusion monster using monsters you control as materials once per turn, and a monster effect where you contribute this card to add polymerization from your deck or graveyard to your hand. So a very fusion focused card. It can allow you to fusion summon once per turn with its pendulum effect, which is definitely a positive effect that might warrant the bad scales of 4, because a 4 on a pendulum scale is generally considered a negative effect because it's such a bad scale. However, its ability to fusion summon has situationally been useful, as the archetype it belongs to can go into Odd Eye's Vortex Dragon, which is a fusion monster with an Omni Negate that requires an Odd Eye's monster, and just a pendulum monster as its materials. However, the main reason this card is in this video is because the card art design for this was actually drawn by a 9-year-old girl for a monster design contest. On screen you can see the original design drawing, and the monster was originally given the effect by its creator, where you could pay 1000 life points in order to allow this card to attack all monsters your opponent controls with the same attribute as this card once each, which is quite a different effect than what the card actually received. And there is also another Performapal card called Performapal Trump Girl, which has an effect for once per turn you can fusion summon using monsters you control, including this card. And if it's destroyed in the pendulum zone, you can special summon a dragon type fusion monster from your graveyard. And Trump Girl came out 1 year after Trump Witch, so it seems they created another iteration of the fan card with a similar effect, although this one presumably had an original design done by a Konami artist. Next up, we have Evil Twin's Trouble Sunny. This card is the boss monster for the Evil Twin archetype, and has the effect where as a quick effect it contributes itself to special summon a Kisa Kill and a Leela monster from your graveyard, which if it's used on its 2 Link monsters allows you to pop 1 card and draw 1 card during your opponent's turn. It also has the graveyard effect where you can banish this card from your graveyard to send an Evil Twin monster from your hand or deck or face up on the field to the graveyard, in order to non-target, non-destroy, send 1 card on the field to the graveyard. And because of this graveyard effect, Evil Twin's Trouble Sunny has seen play as a target for Ultimate Slayer outside of Evil Twin decks, in order to get more value off of being able to pop another card if you want to destroy a Link monster with Ultimate Slayer, which has the effect to send an extra deck monster on the field to the graveyard by sending a similar type of card from your extra deck to the graveyard. The main benefit of Ultimate Slayer being that your opponent can't activate cards in response to its effect. And Trouble Sunny has definitely helped live twin monsters see some success in competitive environments, and is one of those few cards which was released after the initial wave of support for the archetype, in order to make it a lot better. However, Evil Twin Trouble Sunny, like a lot of the Live Twin cards, is a card full of references in its card artwork. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can see a reenactment of Rika Glamour, which is a spell card that allows you to add a Rika monster from your deck to your hand, and a second one if you tribute a plant monster when you activate the effect. The effect of Rika Glamour has nothing to do with the Live Twins archetype. It seems as if they were just a fan of the position of the two Rika monsters in the original card, and just had to make a Live Twin monster reenactment for the sake of this fake advertisement. Konami did release an image that has all of the ads in Trouble Sunny, so we can see the full image of it, as part of it is actually cut off in the original artwork, and you can see that Leela is in the bottom left, dressed up as Hellbore the Rika Fairy. And on top of Rika Glamour, there's a vertical ad with Instant Fusion, Immord number 1, and Immord number 2. Instant Fusion has the effect where you can pay 1000 life points to special summon any level 5 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck. And both of these monsters can be used to fuse together in order to go into Carbanola Warrior, which is a non-effect level 4 fusion monster that has actually seen competitive play in the past, specifically because it's a warrior type monster that can be brought out with Instant Fusion. Mainly in decks that specifically needed level 4 warrior type monsters in order to go into some kind of extra deck play. Next up, you can see a reference to the card Monster Assortment in the upper right hand corner, with the monsters Zombina and Zombino being replaced with the two Live Twins in two separate images. And the final reference in the middle of the right side has Leela holding a beverage with a Z and a 4000 on it, which is very reminiscent of the trap card Nutrient Z. And this is a trap card that has the effect where if you take 2000 or more battle damage in one chunk, you can activate this card in order to gain 4000 life points. And besides those images, all of the other billboards are just references to ads in real life, or probably other movie references, just with the two Live Twin monsters in their poses. And finally, let's go over the Ally of Justice Enemy Catcher. This is a level 6 monster with 1800 attack and defense, and has the effect that when this card is normal summoned, you can take control of one of your opponent's face down defense position monsters until the end of the turn. Now, what's unique about this card is that it belongs to the Ally of Justice archetype, which is an archetype primarily designed around countering light attribute monsters. Where if you look at cards like Ally of Justice Quarantine, it prevents both players from special summoning light monsters. Ally of Justice Core Destroyer can destroy a light monster that it battles at the start of the damage step. And Ally of Justice Psycho Reader is a hand trap that can discard itself in order to banish up to 2 light monsters from your opponent's graveyard. And pretty much all the other Ally of Justice monsters have effects in the same vein, where they have effects that are almost exclusively tied to countering light attribute monsters. So why does Ally of Justice Enemy Breaker break this mold and have an effect that only targets face down monsters instead? Well, it's because of the lore of the Ally of Justice. You see, in Yu-Gi-Oh card lore, the Ally of Justice machines were designed in order to counter the worms, which are a series of reptile-like monsters that have an abundance of flip effect monsters. The main search of the archetype Worm Kartaras has an effect in order to search out any level 4 or lower reptile-type worm monster from your deck on its flip summon. And while this effect is restrictive pretty much only to the worm archetype, they do have some generic flip effect monsters that you could steal as well. There's Worm Apocalypse, which destroys a spell or trap card when it's flip face up, or even Worm Yagan, which can bounce one of your opponent's monsters when it's flip face up. So because Ally of Justice were supposed to counter worms in lore, pretty much all of their effects only work against light attribute monsters, since all of the worms are light. However, worms also have an abundance of face down monsters. So having one of the Ally of Justice cards only work against face down monsters does make sense when you know this little background behind the Ally of Justice cards. And it would probably be easy to miss this little fact because Ally of Justice has got to be one of the worst archetypes ever made. And worms aren't much better. Back when Konami first released archetypes of cards that had continuous lore being told through their cards, the original ones were kind of bad, and they didn't start getting good until later on in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Where nowadays, lore cards like the Fallen of Albast storyline are meta-defining, and usually see all kinds of play, like with a branded, Sorceol, or Sprite. However, modern day storyline cards don't have garbage incredibly specific effects, and it's probably because of how badly the Ally of Justice cards failed that they stopped doing that, and made the effects more playable. Alright, and that's the video. If you know of any other cards that would fit this series well for whatever reason, please let me know which cards you'd like me to cover in the future iterations of this video down in the comments, as well as explanations as to why you think they would be a good fit.